Welcome to another beautiful day and another day of Dose of Did You Know? And with me today is the man in the mountains, Mr. Skip. How are you today?
Danny, I am fantastic. It's a beautiful day. I was out on a motorcycle ride yesterday, all through the Ozark Mountains here in Arkansas, and being able to connect with nature, with all that's going on, it's a real blessing. So thank you.
Oh, you know what? I was telling you earlier, and I'm going to tell everybody now. When I see your pictures on Facebook of your cabin, I always said there is a story behind that because it is way too unique, and you can just feel the energy. Even through social media, you can feel it. And sure enough, there is a story about it. Share with everybody because I was fascinated. I was like, that's not just a cabin in a gorgeous setting.
Right. Well, I'm the oldest of six kids, and we lived mainly on Navy bases growing up until high school and moved back to Arkansas, which is where my father was from. And his great grandfather his great grandfather was a Cherokee Indian chief named Spotted Horse and lived in this area. And my dad's brother, Jack, who was a big influence in my life in many ways, mostly good, some not so good, but, but he built he was like Grizzly Adams in the TV show or something. He was a gunsmith, a knife maker, and just a musician. But he built log cabins. He built anything he could build, and he built. This was his first log cabin that he built, and I helped him build his first house log cabin right after during college. And this was about 40 years ago, and it was kind of abandoned, and it was his first practice cabin he built with the old-fashioned way of the dovetailed, not just the way the logs are stacked and everything. He said, he goes, at 7 a.m., these were trees down there on the creek. And at 7 p.m., it's a wall, to the cabin. And so been restoring it. But yeah, it's there's something about connecting to the earth, where you find where your DNA, your ancestry, I think you can sense it.
I think you're right. And they always say the things back then were made way better than the things that are made now. And for that to be still like holding up and you being in it, you're showing it to be the truth. But I love how you talk about your father and your uncle were similar but very different. Can you explain that to everybody? Because there's a contrast between them.
Huge. And I think in society, especially in their day and age, it was a huge influence. I mean, you look at generations, and my father raised and basically kind of left home to go to med school, and became a Navy scholarship. He became a flight surgeon, was stationed with the Blue Angels. He became a captain in the Navy. He served in Vietnam, won air medals and so forth, was very much, drive. And as the oldest of five boys and a girl, I got a lot of that. They always say the oldest is a guinea pig.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was very heavy and intense for all of us. And then my uncle, Jack, who was 10 years old, younger, and has passed away. My dad's still alive. He's 86 now. But and still goes to work and still a fireball. But Jack was also in the Navy, served, but he was like a big brother to me, and he was very connected to the ancestry of the indigenous, the Native Americans, the earth, the hands. Like my grandfather was a gunsmith, knife maker. Of course, the Cherokee lineage. My grandfather was a half-blooded Cherokee, and very connected to nature. He was always leave the earth wherever you camp out, leave it better than you found it.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a contrast between my Jack and my dad, and it was usually a conflict. So Jack, I related more to Jack, probably out of rebelliousness against my dad in younger years. He and I have a wonderful relationship now. And ironically, his advice to everybody, and most of them turned their heads and said, did he just say that? My dad's advice to everybody, the kids, the grandkids, he got several great grandkids now. He goes, my advice is simplify, simplify, simplify. So very different.
Yeah, but I think that's created who you are, because you fascinate me with the knowledge you have and the creativity, and then what you put out there, and you being so open with your beliefs of what, not just your belief, but actually things that you've learned along the way. Fill us in. Did the two, growing up with those two different but similar, what is it, role models, create the Skip Thomas that I know now?
That's interesting. That's a good question. I've actually never really thought of it quite like that, but it's very accurate. And of course, we are how we, relate to other people and the people that we meet along the way and that influence us or inspire us. Um, Absolutely. Growing up, I was somewhat rebellious, extremely rebellious in a good way. I wasn't totally destructive, but I would always like to color outside of the lines kind of guy.
Yeah.
If there were rules, I mean, I went to an all Catholic school, so I always would debate and say, well, wait a second, because I was always seeking truth. And so I wouldn't take people's word for anything. And I learned later in life, because I became, my dad paid for my college for the first 3.5 years because I was pre-med, and I was a chemistry major, a biology minor, and a physics minor. But then I decided I wanted to do my own thing. I played music. I was enjoying creative things, so I went back and handed him back the the keys to the car, basically. I mean, I got another car and simplified my life and went into radio, TV, and film and the theater. And through that process, I learned, especially the theater, of influencing audiences.
Mhm.
And you do it with music. I was in Pippin and Cabaret, and Death of a Salesman, and Rudyard Kipling, and children's theater, Just So Stories. I was doing all these things and loving it. But my place wasn't on the stage. I wanted to be behind the camera and create stories. And I was fortunate. My first commercial I did won Best of Show in the Addies and John Muir Film Festival and Houston American Catholic. It was a 30-second commercial for a hospital. Well, that catapulted me into business. And through the years, I started working very much 7 days a week. I mean, 18 hours a day, building one of the largest, fastest growing companies in Arkansas for a couple of years, and a lot in politics. I mean, every industry, every product you can imagine. I worked personally in my late 20s, early 30s with Bill Clinton for probably 15 years, wrote scripts, directed him, and got to know him both as governor and did a few things as president. And then Mike Huckabee, I did all his campaigns as lieutenant governor and governor, and still to this day, we're very close. But the whole time, and hundreds of political things, and I didn't care if it was right, left, what it was. The running was all green, and I needed that for my company.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it wasn't as big an issue as to back then, 10, 20 years ago, as it is today. But it gave me an education of being the man behind the curtain and some really great people that were running for office. I mean, my sister's a state senator here. My brother Bob, who was an Army Ranger, top of his class, worked for the NATO forces and specialized in rescuing hostages. He's running for state senator also. My mother was a committee woman for the Republican committee here for the state of Arkansas. And so we've been very involved, but I worked with some people that weren't so good a lot, and their messaging from the consultants that usually came out of New Jersey and Connecticut didn't care what the politicians really, how good a person they were. They just wanted to get them in office. Here's what we're going to do to win. And it was really ugly. And I was creating the messages. I was creating the lie, the propaganda, for a lot of things, advertising and healthcare and all stuff. And so it became very apparent to me that, as my success, and I was on the cover of American Express, Your Company in Business, and we had all kinds of stories. We were doing great. But the higher And the more awards and recognition we received and the bigger our company got, the more empty I felt, to the point of really being sick. And when that article came out and several things happened, I really just kind of went inside and went to the woods, not far from here, for several days. And I contemplated and prayed. I said, God, why am I here? If this is it, you can freaking have it. Because this was, but I thought I did everything I thought was right. I did everything that I was told and inspired to do by society. And I had the house and the family and the recognition and God, and it was just crazy. And that's when I decided I've got to change everything, because the question was, what is the legacy as I prayed, what is the legacy you want to leave? And
Powerful.
And I thought, and I thought, well, this isn't it. So I refused to get involved in politics. I moved to Sedona, lived there for 12 years, and I stayed out of all of this until 8 years ago, when I was told I was going to be a grandfather. My daughter said, "You're going to be a grandfather. What do you want to be called? Papa?" I said, "Oh no, I want to be like Barney. I want to be like a cartoon character." And then I thought, she's going to ask me one day, you used to work with all these people and you used to create the messages, and did you not know what was going on with our country and not do anything to try to help save it? And my answer, the way I said it, would have been, no, it wasn't going to be my problem. I did my part, and I'm just retired and hanging out in the beautiful Red Rocks of Sedona. Sorry about that. No, on my deathbed, that was not going to be my answer. And so I thought, what's it going to be? So I snuck into a bunch of political meetings. I got involved with some very high level intelligence agency people that was pretty scary about what I learned, and that they could tell me that wasn't classified. And they inspired me and invited me to help them tell messages and work with them. And that's when I got active again. Yeah. And that's kind of, today I thought, okay, there's a wake up part of this. And then there is, what do we want instead? How do we be the change we want to see in the world? And now I have awakentv.com. That's my kind of website for awakening people. And then I have Amplifying Truth, which are people like yourself that are doing things on the front line, the people that you've interviewed. We've talked about Tamara Hunter and Chemo Buddies for Life, and I'm very active with them, of people on the front line that are making a difference. And she has a Service Heroes thing, which I think have been featured, and that, it's people making a difference. And that's exactly what but people, to know the truth, they have to know what the lie was, and being part of the crafting, the deception behind the curtain. I've seen it and I've lived it, and I was a part of it, and I was good at it. It was, but that I thought, okay, well, I could go to hell for all I did, but I thought, okay, how do I shift that? And that's what I'm doing now.
Oh, and this is one of the things I love about you, is you speak the truth. You speak of, that's what I was. And then you woke up one day, you had a coming to Jesus moment, where you just got on your knees and said, this is not okay. Instead of ignoring it, because you were successful, you were getting the praise, you were getting the money, but you didn't ignore that emptiness inside, and it switched you. And then another thing that is so huge, and why you're so impactful, at least to me in my world and my little bit with you, is that I always say, we can complain and we can talk and we can protest, we can do all this, but then what? If you don't do anything after that, you're doing nothing. You're just wasting energy, wasting time, and accomplishing nothing than where you were in the beginning. So I love that you have this awaken part, man. And you guys, awakentv.com, you got to check it out, because it's intense. You need to be ready to, and I love that about you. You're not scared You don't care. It's just truth. This is not some Skip Thomas's delusional world that he's putting out there. It's his truth. But then you have this other piece that you're like, here's the good. This is what you can do now that you know the truth. I love that.
Well, and it's not easy, because when you step out, you get this herd mentality with people in communities and fit in. And honestly, in advertising, that's what the goal was. You tried to get people to be part of this movement of just conforming to a concept, a belief system. And I did so much of that in my life. And now I'm busting that. It's kind of, you hear a lot of references to the Matrix, of people living inside this illusion. Well, I was helping create that illusion and telling them, keep taking, you got the red pill or the blue pill kind of thing we talk a lot about.
Yeah.
And the blue pill just keeps you pacified and living in that illusion. And my job was to make sure they love the blue pill. That's what I did for 35 years. But inside I was all red pill. I was like, that's when you step outside. And once you know what's going on from outside of the house, looking at it through different windows, you realize, like, okay, you can never go back to that unawakened state. And that's the whole point of Awaken TV. Well, I can say that a lot of my family, a lot of my friends, people are invested because the systems of the media, 90% of it's owned by 6 corporations, and they own a narrative. And my son, who I'm very proud of, and this is where I have to just let everybody choose and do their life, but I love him. And he just was elected the president of the News Guild, which is the union of all journalists, radio, TV, film for America and Canada.
Wow.
And so he's the president of this. And so he's in probably the toughest time for that job ever. And he has to navigate on some very dangerous waters. But I'm very proud of him, and he's smart. He's got a good heart, and he'll do the right thing. Mm-hmm. But again, it's like, we've lived, I've lived through so much of this on so many different views, that I've seen so much that other people haven't seen. And it's hard for people to accept it. And, you hear a lot of terms about, conspiracy theories and so forth. You're going to hear that, and you hear it in the press room a lot. And of course, that term was invented by the CIA back when John F. Kennedy was assassinated, because people that wanted to kind of question it, oh, you're just a conspiracy theorist. Well, that was a very rogue CIA creation. And it's been used as a tool, and it's going to be used a lot. It is now, and it's going to be used a lot more. And it's kind of crazy when you can kind of see the evolution and what's really playing out, because I was part of the guy, like we were talking about the Wizard of Oz, the guy behind the curtain. Pay no attention to the guy behind the curtain. Well, I know what's behind the curtain. I was there, and just on a small part, but I was surrounded by people who were very involved in it. So yeah, it's important, and I hope and pray that sadly, with what's going on in the world, the awakening is happening. We say you can pick a red pill or a blue pill in the Matrix. Well, now there's only red pills left, because there is no way you cannot wake up with what's happening. Mm-hmm. And the red pill is not a pill; it's a massive suppository. So it's going to be painful.
It is. It's extremely, you're actually seeing the pain for people now. You're seeing the fight of, like, they do not want to accept that red pill. They do not want, and that's where I see the conflict coming from. Whether it doesn't matter what, like you said, it does not matter what you believe, but you have to wake up to the reality of the facts. We can't live in this delusional little world anymore. And if you do, you're going to become very angry, because you're living in a state of disappointment.
Well, and that's a good point because, and it's really so much bigger than left or right or black and white or Asian or,
Mhm.
again, having crafted those things, I know what's going on. And this is a much bigger thing than what we're presented. And you can put it in spiritual terms, not necessarily religious terms, but this is a spiritual warfare. And we are in uh, World War III, if you want to call it that. I mean, John F. Kennedy taught, and you hear a lot about it's about infiltration, not invasion. Well, so much has been infiltrated from our, indoctrinated school system to now we hear about the FBI and the DOJ and the IRS and all the Brent and all the things that are coming out to the surface. It's been about infiltration, which is what JFK said in his speech 5 days before he was assassinated. And of course, then again, anybody that questioned it was called a conspiracy theorist. That they invented that term. But what's happening now is when you say anger and fear, which is part of, from a creative point of view of the person who will create the messages, and I would sit in strategy rooms to decide how are we going to promote anger and fear and separation. That's what we did, and that's what they are doing right now. And if you look at fear and anger and the emotions, those are very low vibrational. If you look on a spiritual kind of level,
Right.
they lower your immune system. You've heard all about this,
Hmm.
but you get up to that frequency of peace or joy or love, very high frequency, and those dark frequencies cannot exist in that, and they cannot operate in that higher vibrational world. And so, what has to happen, and I don't want to say this as a spiritual revolution in the sense of the Crusades or evangelical movement, but it is a movement and it's a high vibration movement. Call it what you want. I work a lot with indigenous Native Americans. I worked at the Return of the Ancestors in 2009, which was about, it was called by a 13th generation high priest of the Mayans, and I was invited to film this for them, and they brought over 100 cultures together from all over the world: the Kogis, the Lakota, the Hopi, I mean, from Tibet and Japan and the Amazon, everywhere in Africa. And these spiritual leaders came together to talk about the prophecies at the end of the Mayan calendar and the apocalypse, which is the lifting of the veil. It doesn't have a damn thing to do with what Hollywood calls it, blowing up and stuff. Apocalypse means lifting of the veil. What's it going to look like, and will people be able to navigate through it? That was in 2009, over 10 years ago. And
Wow.
part of that's in my movie, Sacred Journey of the Heart. But that's where we're at. And the veil is being lifted big time.
Hmm.
And so we go back to these ancestral spiritual wisdom carriers and our roots, which is why I like being in nature, because it grounds me. The frequencies of the earth and the frequencies of love and we're, I mean, we talked about, and I know you asked the question. I've heard you ask the question or make the statement, lead with love,
Yeah.
which I love. And actually, we're starting a thing called the Tour of Love. And that's a whole other piece of this with music and keynote speakers and so forth. And there will be a lot on Awaken TV and Amplifying Truth. But, Martin Luther King had a great quote, which is timely with all that's going on, is that love is the only force capable of transforming an enemy into a friend. I think was his quote. And that's so true. We have to lead with love, and that's a vibration. And I would call it the enemy, the dark forces, the darkness to light, whatever you want to call it. That's what's critical right now is that component of love.
I couldn't agree more. I know we've gone back and forth and said that I've talked about that, about leading with love. And when it's a practice. It's not something that you just say, I'm going to lead with love, and whoa, you're leading with love. It is a practice act, because there will be times that you will be tested. There will be times that you will be aggravated. You will get frustrated. But when you just can come within yourself, go into nature, do whatever it is, but you say, you know what? I'm going to react from a love state. That doesn't mean you agree. That doesn't mean you're on the same page, but you cannot argue. There is a refusal. Like, I understand, I'm not going to agree, but I see you with a complete light inside you. It's very hard for people to understand that, but you got to practice it.
Yes. Yeah. And it's a frequency that you create, a practice, a tool that keeps that frequency going, because it's so easy with all the things going on to have it little sucky tubes attached to you and suck that light out of you. And that love, it's great to love everybody and love this or that, but love yourself first. Because if you can't come from a place of love, then you're not good for anybody else. You're not the example of that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's time, and I think people are. I know that we are being called to make a choice. And you can call it a dark versus light, good versus evil. I call it a love versus anger, hate. High vibration versus low.
Yeah,
we're at a crossroad, and I think, and this is bringing out the best of people and the worst of people.
yes,
Period.
yes. Yes, I said it's making it very clear, because even within myself, my first reaction, if I don't like that first reaction that's coming out of me, it's giving me the opportunity. It's such in the frontal lobe of my brain right now that I'm like, oh, Danny, we need to work on that. We need to take a look at ourselves internally. So it's not just looking outward at what's going on. It's really having that time right now and opening it up. At least this is my belief, to look at our actions and our thoughts that are coming, immediately to us, because then we can change it. I mean, we can be like, whoa, no, thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so this love, it's a frequency, it's a state of being. It happens within yourself. And, and and if you're in it with other people, you talk a lot. I think you coach relationships and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And, in terms of, love for, two people is really, much like having is made up, like for me, a single soul living in two people, and that's that connection. It's when you're the other person's happiness and well-being is just as important or more important, than your own. Is where we have to be, and so much of what's motivated is the ego or anger, the self. That's an internal disease, a cancer. And what's sad is a lot of that anger is being turned upon people who are good, who are light bearers or in love, and bringing that. I think it was Plato that said something to the effect of that love is a serious mental disease. That was Plato, and I think that I think in a good way. I think a lot of that's being used in a bad way. Is that if it's like up is down and down is up, and we have to really ask people to critically think and value on their own. Don't listen. Turn the freaking TV off. Throw it out the window. I mean, that's how I made my living. And but when you ask people, well, how do you know? Well, I haven't seen it on the TV set. Well, no, you haven't seen it on, and you're not going to see it on the TV set. So we have to really empower people to reach inside their own heart and their own soul, and get the answer, because everything you need, everything you need to know is already there. It's not outside you.
Right. So well said. We have so many people commenting and responding. We'll have to go back and respond to them. But Sherry, she just came up. She said she loves you so much. You're an amazing man. So I want to make sure that you hear that from Sherry. And as we're closing, I always ask everyone this question, and if you can answer it, I know you will answer it honestly. And what comes to the first thing in your mind is, Skip, how do you see love right now today as we sit here together? How does Skip see love?
Whew, God, we should have started with that one. We could have done the whole show on that. You know, when love rules, you know, there's no will to power. When true love, authentic love rules, there's no will to power, or greed, or ego, or or conflict or force. But when power and force dominate, that's when love is lacking. And so it's like shadows of each other. And going back to again what Martin Luther King said, you know, with you know that you know, it's the only force that's capable of transforming an enemy into a friend. If ever we need that, and being from Martin Luther King, which obviously is a significant figure who marched and promoted those messages of unity, and I have a dream. That's We need to reignite that dream of love for tomorrow, today, within our own hearts, within our own homes, within our own neighborhoods, within our own states and our country. That's critical right now.
It is. It is. It's so thank you for that reminder and your, you know, your version of what love is. I love that. It's not the ego, it's not the power, right? It's that place other than that. That was so well said. So Skip, thank you so much for taking time today to share who you are. I feel like we talked like this much about who actually Skip Thomas is. There's so many levels to you. But guys, check out his awakentv.com. That's my favorite. That's the one I'm always like, because I like to know. I want to be in the know. I do not want to be that person that's, you know, blinded by whatever, you know. So thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for like coming out, speaking, and not just like going through the day-to-day stuff when you knew it was wrong. You are an amazing, amazing man. And I'm so blessed to have found you and have you in my life now. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, and bless you for all that you're doing and what your family's doing. And my prayers are with them and with you. And so keep it going, and we'll be in touch. Anything I can do to help, let me know.
We definitely will. I will talk to you later, Skip. Have a great day.
Okay. Bye.